Alrighty, folks, let's get this show on the road, shall we? Are you excited? I'm excited. Let me pop over here so y'all can see me. Good morning, everyone. My name is VooDoo Val, and I'm going to be your host yet again this morning for another Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge, and I'm super pumped for today. As I mentioned for the previous challenges, if you were here, I have themed all of these challenges based on the branding and design for some of our favorite pop culture TV shows. I'm sure you noticed the description today is distress typography, and we are taking a little bit of inspiration from Peaky Blinders. I think Peaky Blinders has some really bold, punchy text. I feel like every episode begins with the Peaky Blinders title in caps with grit and texture and all of that stuff. So I think that is going to be kind of cool to explore today. So we are going to dive in and get started on that. But first, I have utilized the wonderful and fabulous free section of Adobe stock this morning for some assets and things that we're going to be using for the challenge. So I'm going to pop over there, show you folks what I'm using so that you can use the very same assets I'm going to be using. If you're going to be following along with me this morning, please check the description below because that is where you will find not only the starter file so that you can begin with me today, but also where you will find a link to the Discord so that you can post your work if you would like to share. Top Show, what's up? What's up? It's good to see all you folks in the chat. I see Steve, Sam Peterson, Odari, Clarissa, Carol, General Kenobi. Hello there. It is good to see all of you folks. So let's pop into it, shall we? I'm going to grab my window here just so that we can see all of the assets I'm using. Let me snag this and let's dive into it. So the first thing that I want to show off is the fonts that we're using for today. So I've just come over to Adobe Fonts, fonts.adobe.com, and I'm taking a look at the font packs. So there's a lot of font packs which you can go if you just click on font packs, and you can scroll through here to all of these amazing fonts. And I actually, I mean, you can come in if you want, you can go to all fonts if you want and take a look at what is available to you. You can search visually here with all of the tags. You can go into the classifications and the properties and all that stuff and find some pretty cool fonts that way. But I went through all of the awesome font packs which are available. And I found this font pack called The Way Back, which says Annie Atkins brings 19th century flair with these 9 fonts. And if you click in here, you'll see there's some really cool kind of old-timey fonts that I just thought were really cool. I thought T-shirt regular was actually pretty neat as it has like some distressed qualities to it already. If I preview the font family, you can kind of see all of the awesome texture and stuff in there, which you can use if you like. But what I wanted to do is create the texture ourselves. So I actually decided to go with Trevor here. And I'm going to be using the extra bold, but I'm also going to be using another version of the font. So you can come up here, you can say activate all of the fonts in this font pack, which I've done, but I also made sure to go into the font family and make sure I have all the fonts active, because as you can see, there's a bunch of different font weights and all that good stuff, which we are going to utilize today. I also feel like an element of the Peaky Blinders style branding. Obviously, there is a lot of grainy, gritty textures, a lot of like cold, damp brick walls, you know, kind of dreary, kind of bleak vibes there. And so I've gone to Adobe stock.adobe.com, and I've searched the term grit here, which you can see there's a lot of really cool grit textures and things. And what I have picked out is this perfect black brick wall here, which is pretty fabulous. So this is going to be our background for this today. And then what I've also done is I found this cool terrazzo floor, which is also free here, and this subtle grain texture, which is also free from Adobe stock. And we're going to kind of composite all of these in with the use of our filters and things to create a really cool piece. So I'm going to bump this over here. And what I'm also going to do for you folks today is I am going to snag these links just to make things easy, and I'm going to post them into the chat just so you folks can have all of these fabulous assets and resources, just because I want to just give it to you right here so that everyone can just click those links, snag them if you'd like to use the same assets. Otherwise, kind of search around on Adobe stock, maybe find something that's right for you and your project. So this is our starter file here today. I've got the info, which I'm going to hide, and I've got this kind of graphic to set the tone, set the mood a little bit, and I've created this background texture, which you can also use in your project if you wish. I'm going to be using a different background, but there's kind of a nice gritty texture in here for you folks that I've created. And the first thing we are going to do is we are going to grab, let me pull up my Finder window. We are going to grab our stock photo for our brick wall today, because we're going to kind of create this scene and create our space for design. And I feel like a brick wall is a great place to start. As I said, I think that this is kind of a cool theme that is very prominent in the show's branding, and it's going to be fun to work with. I just kind of have dragged my image in and transformed it, holding Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and Shift, because that allows me to transform from the center like I did. And I'm just going to hit Enter. And you can see this texture is really nice. It's very nice. And just kind of shout out to the free section of Adobe stock for having really excellent assets for us there. So we've created this, and I know that I am going to want to use a displacement map to add grit and texture to a lot of the elements we're going to be putting over top here. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to create a displacement map. So we have this as our background, and I'm going to leave this as our background, but I'm also going to create a displacement map that's just our square here, our square sized canvas. And the way I'm going to do that is by holding Control or Command and pressing A, which will select the borders of our canvas here, and then Control or Command J, and that's going to duplicate. So as you can see, if I hide this, here our Adobe stock image, if I hit Control or Command T to transform, we've got this whole image here that's hanging off the edge of the canvas. But by selecting the canvas and duplicating just what was inside my selection now, if I go to this new layer and hit Control or Command T, you can see it's just the shape of our square here, which is pretty nifty. Now, let me go ahead. I'm going to hit Enter. I'm going to convert this to a smart object, and I am going to actually open up this smart object here. I am going to come over and just double click the icon there, and this opens it up in its own file. And I am going to alter this a little bit to create a displacement map. So what a displacement map is going to do for us is anything we apply the displacement map to, it's going to read the values of the displacement map and alter the shape and texture and what have you of the element we are affecting according to the values of that image. So what we want to do is make these values super dramatic, and we can do that by hitting Control L to open our levels. This is a way that you could approach it. And I'm going to crank that middling cursor there up, and then I'm going to bring the blacks in, because what I want it to do is to really be very dramatic as far as our values here. We're going to go ahead and click OK, and you can see that that's made this there's a distinction between the lights and darks big time here, and I'm going to save this as a brand new PSD file on my computer. So I'm going to hit Control Shift S, which is save as, and I'm going to save on my computer. And then I am going to call this, let's put this in the right folder here. I'm going to find where all of my DCC files are, and I'm going to call this, make sure you set it to PSD, and I'm going to call this, you can see I've done a few tests here, I'm going to call this disp map 3 because I've got a couple tests in here. I want to make sure I find the right one, and I'm going to hit save and make sure I hit OK. So now I have a PSD that is just this file here, super dramatic in its values, and we can use that as our displacement map. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then I'm going to hide that, and now I can kind of work. I'll throw this into my, actually I'll throw all the stuff I'm not using into my info thing here. So we are using our Adobe stock photo as our background now, and now we want to add a little bit of text, which we will apply the displacement map to. So with T, I'm going to hit T on my keyboard to access my type tool. I'm going to make sure that this is above here. And I already have Trevor selected, but you can, after you activate the fonts, you can just go to your drop-down menu and search for Trevor if that is what you're going to use, or whichever other font you think is right for your project. And I am going to write some big punchy text. Now, I'm not going to put Peaky Blinders. I want this to be Adobe theme. So we're going to write the words pen tool blend modes. That is our Peaky parody for today. So I'm gonna make sure my caps lock is on, and I'm gonna write pen, I wrote pan, pen tool, and I'm gonna make this 2 separate fonts. And I'm just transforming this, honestly. You can make this a little more specific if you like. Honestly, we could change this to 190 just to make it a nice even size here, and then I will Control or Command J to duplicate that text and transform it and kind of drag another one up here or down here, and I'm going to change this, if I can highlight everything, and we're gonna write blend modes. Boom. And I'm going to change the font and the size weight of this. So we have extra bold here, but I think we're going to go into extra light for this. And we are going to, I'm just going to Control T or Command T to free transform. I'm holding Alt and Shift at the same time so that I can resize from the center. And then I'll put that right there. And then I'm going to see... this is at 136.04, so I'm just going to round this to an even 136 just to be fancy. And so now we have pen tool and blend modes, and I'm going to select both of these type layers here. Hello, Becca, welcome in. It's good to see you. Welcome in, everybody. Valdare, hello, hello. I'm going to select both of these just by holding Control and selecting the layers that I'd like to select at the same time here. And I'm going to come up to my color, and I'm just going to change this to white. Boom. So now we have this, a pen tool, blend modes, and I am going to, with those still selected, right click and hit convert to smart objects. So if I want to later on, after I've applied a bunch of effects and things to this smart object, I could double click this and it will open pen tool blend modes in another file, which I could edit, and then those edits will appear in my main file here if that is what I wish. So the next thing, let's go ahead and center this. Like so. I want to just make sure it's nice and fancy. So we have pen tool and blend modes, and we need to give this some texture because we want that grit, that punchy grit, that awesome texture to go with this. And so we are going to do that by applying a blending mode, applying a displacement map. And the way that you do that is with your layer selected that you wish to apply it to, just come up and go to Filter, scroll down to Distort, and hit Displace right here. And I am going to, I think, change my horizontal and vertical scale to about 30. I think that'll work for me. Let's go ahead and hit OK. It will allow me to open and select my displacement map, which we've just created displacement map 3 here. So I'm going to double click that. And boom, you can see that it has applied. And this is pretty darn crazy here. This is a really, really dramatic. And I don't know if we want it to be that dramatic, but you can see how if I zoom in here, it has taken our text and it has applied texture based on the exact grooves and what have you of our background image, because our displacement map is identical in texture to it. So what I can do if I want to crank this down a little bit is over in my layers here, you can see if I'm just going to bump this up so you can see more of my layers. This pen tool layer now has smart filters, and I can hide and unhide my displacement map if I want, and I can also double click this little filter settings thing here if I would like to change the opacity of the displacement map. I could do that if I wanted, but I think what I might do is go ahead and Control Z, and we'll do that again. I'll just go filter and then I'll reapply the displacement map, and I think I'll turn this down. Let's go ahead and do like a 10. And just see where that gets us. I think that's a little bit, it might be a little bit better. I'm wondering if, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. We'll leave it and we'll alter the displacement maps as we go. So we've got like this nice texture around the edges. I feel like I want to add a splash of color here. So on a new layer, I will Control or Command Shift N to create a new layer. I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool, which you can grab by pressing M on your keyboard or coming up here to your toolbar and snagging. And I am just going to kind of drag this out, grab my paint bucket tool, select a nice red color, and throw that in there, which I think looks pretty darn you know, it's not really extra. You know what I mean? It's not really fancy, but we can make it fancy with blending modes and another displacement map. So I will Control or Command D to deselect, kind of keeping track of my time here, which I think we have enough time to make some pretty fabulous stuff still. And I'm going to, with this selected, I'm going to come over to Filter and I'm going to displace this as well. I think we need a little more. Let's try working with the blending modes first so that we can see. I think what we're going to end up doing is probably throwing this on like a overlay. I think overlay is going to work for us. And I might transform this as well just to kind of bring it up like so. I'm wondering if we should have it between the bricks or over top of the brick break there. We can experiment with that. And then let's go ahead and displace it. I think actually let's do it from scratch. Let's not use the redo there. Let's go ahead and go to Distort, Displace. And I want to crank this one up. I want to crank this one up to like 30 and see what we get with that. We'll do the same displacement map. I feel like it needs more. So let's go ahead and go back. I'm going to convert this to a smart object as well so I can see all the changes I'm making. We'll go Distort, Displace, and let's crank that up to 100. And then select our displacement map. And I think that kind of, if you zoom in here, you can see the texture on that looks more interesting. So we'll go ahead and do that. And this is cool. I almost wonder if we ought to fiddle with the displacement map a little bit on our text, because I feel like it looks very uniform, but not as good as it could be. So I am going to hide that displacement filter there, and I will come up to Filter to reapply a displacement map. And I am going to, I feel like 100 would be too crazy, but let's try it. What the heck? Let's go for it. Too much! Too much! Too much, too much, too much, too much. I also have another displacement map, which I made just with the full scale image instead of just the square of the image, where I did something like this, where I just came in. and I opened this whole file, and I made a displacement map out of the entire file, which was my first displacement map that I created. And the reason why I did that is because then it will apply smaller texture details to my text, just in case that was something we wanted to try. So let's try that displacement map. Let's go to Filter, Distort, Displace, and I'm going to put this on 30. Hit OK, and then I'll go to this first displacement test that I created, and see how that goes. That's not so bad. I like the texture on it, but I feel like we want to tone it down, so let's do the same thing, and let's crank this back down to 10. Okay, grab our first here and see how that's kind of cool. I feel like it's still readable. It's got some nice textured edges, and I think that we will use that one. All right, so we've got our blend modes, pen tool blend modes. We've got our background wall. We've got our red stripe across here that looks pretty cool, but I feel like we kind of need to fiddle with some blend modes to bring the texture of the letters, or of the wall, through the letters to really make it look like it's sitting there. Because right now it just looks like really flat text with textured edges over a pretty cool looking background, but it doesn't really fit. So what I'd like to do is, obviously I think you could come through and apply a blend mode to it, but if we scroll through our blend modes, you can see that they're not, you know, we're working with white here, and it doesn't really do what we want it to do, really. I guess you could use hard mix, but it's, you know, more red. It doesn't really look like that realistic vibe that we're going for. So what I suggest is grabbing your background, which I will duplicate with Control or Command J, and I'm going to bring this up above. And I'm going to alter our levels and layers and things here. Let me hit escape so I'm not selected on my blend modes. I'm going to grab the levels panel with Control or Command L. And I'm going to make this super dramatic, kind of like we did with our displacement map, like so. Just make it really, really like as light as we can possibly get it. I wonder if I don't even need to bring that black over. No, we definitely need to bring the black shapes in, like so. I'll go ahead and hit OK, and then I am going to apply this over top of everything here with a blend mode, just to get that the black areas between the bricks on top of our text. So I'll come through here and just kind of scroll. Honestly, darken looks pretty good. Multiply also looks pretty good. I feel like it should be a choice between these. Let me zoom in here just so we can see. It's starting to look pretty darn cool. And I'm just kind of flipping. I have my blending mode selected. You can see it's got the blue highlight around the edges, so I've got those selected. And I can kind of flip through with my up and down arrow keys. I feel like I like the darker version, and there's probably a lot that I can do if I scroll all the way through these blend modes, but I don't really like them as much as I like the multiply and darken. I think I'm going to go with multiply, to be honest. So I'll hit escape and just leave the multiply there. I feel like you can still read it. It's got that nice texture in there, and something else we can do is maybe grab some of our other textures and start to throw some more composite, some more texture into here. So I'm going to snag this Adobe stock photo, which I shared in the chat. And I think I'll Control or Command T to free transform, and I'm just going to drag these, like kind of alter this and drag this to the edges of my canvas. And I think that you can do this. You can free transform and kind of distort an image like this in this way when it's a texture. I don't think that we need to worry about keeping the aspect ratio of the original piece so much when we're working with something like this. So I feel comfortable and confident doing that. I'll hit enter, and then we will kind of scroll through these blend modes and see what we land on, just to give it a little extra texture. That's actually pretty cool, the lighten. I feel like it kind of adds a little bit of fog to our piece, and I wonder what that would look like if I just brought the fill down on it. I think that's pretty neat, honestly. And then we could come in on a new layer, grab my brush, hit B on my keyboard, grab a soft round brush. I'm going to make sure that I'm not using dissolve for this one, and I can make my brush larger with my bracket keys, and we could add a little spot of light and then flip through some blend modes to add a little bit of bright atmosphere to this. Maybe crank the fill down just to add a little bit of something. It adds a little bit of that red texture in there too, and I think it looks cool. So I hope that you folks have enjoyed this challenge. I do have to take off. That is the end of the line for me today. I will be back tomorrow morning with another awesome challenge. I hope you folks will stay tuned because we've got plenty of awesome stuff coming up for the rest of the Adobe Live Day. Happy designing, folks, and I will see you next time. Adios, everyone.